It's the big question to kick us off. Why didn't the McLarens pit under the safety car? It cost them the race. And as soon as everyone else pitted, it was an obvious gaffe that you knew they were going to have to make a pit stop. It was 26 seconds for the stop. And to make matters worse in Qatar, there was a mandated stint length on the tyres, which was 25 laps on the medium. So they couldn't exactly change their plan. They had to then just go. And because it was a long safety car, they didn't have a huge amount of time to make up the gap either. So the question, why didn't they pit? Well, they didn't pit because they thought others wouldn't pit. And they didn't want to pit and fall into traffic, leaving Max Verstappen, let's say, out front and making the most of clear air, whilst they're stuck in traffic, could be 10th place, could be 12th place. And we saw how difficult it was to overtake in Qatar. So they were cautious, and basically they didn't read the room. If they knew everyone else was pitting, it was obvious to pit. But from the front of the field, you've got to make that call. And it's something that was preset. It was obvious enough to the rest of the teams that they did come in, and McLaren should have run the numbers and seen basically what the decisions would be for the Haas guys, the Racing Bulls, the Aston Martins, because everyone else's strategy makes a big impact on the McLaren strategy in a race like this. If Verstappen had pitted but half the field stayed out and Max re-emerged into P11, he wouldn't have won the race. McLaren's would have won and their strategy would have worked out, but they didn't read it right, and because everyone else pitted, it made them look pretty silly.
So Verstappen comes in, he does the opposite of both McLarens who remain on the racetrack.
And the McLarens here could pay a heavy price for staying out.
So what else could they have done with the cars in first and third? Well, there's been a lot of talk about keeping fairness between Oscar and Lando, and absolutely that's what they wanted to do. And you could tell in the way that they set up. The car started on the same tyre and they were on the same strategy at lap 7. It was the wrong one. But because one had a blooper on the strategy, I don't think McLaren then would have intentionally sabotaged the other. I think they were preset on their plan, and Lando didn't react to Max, but the time to react to Max was very little, and you don't know at that point that Verstappen's made the right call and Oscar hasn't. So that was the first part. The second part is the double stack, and it's something that other teams had to do. So let's have a look at the gaps when everyone came into the pits. This is the whole field, and you can see it's fairly well spread out because it's lap 7, so it's equal distances really between the field, but no one's really more than a couple of seconds apart. And if we actually look through and see the gaps between the teammates for the double stack, it would have been a bit tight for the two McLarens to do it, but it wasn't the tightest of anyone in the field. In fact, the Ferrari guys were a bit tighter. Haas, Esteban Ocon actually stayed out the first lap to do something different as well, but he had very little to lose from the back of the field. But it was possible for the McLarens to double stack and get out in space. Let's have a look at the video then, because Max Verstappen manages to get out between Antonelli and Carlos Sainz. That's a 2.5 second gap, and that is what Lando Norris would have had between Sainz and Alonso as well. So you've got Verstappen there being released after Antonelli, you've got your 2 second gap, and there he goes. Now there are gaps that form between cars when they're all filtering, and it looks like it's bedlam, but a Formula One pit crew is a well-oiled machine, and McLaren's bay is this one up here. So it's the first bay. They have to wait for every car to stream through or pick your gap, and you can see there is just small ones for various cars to be released into. And looking at the gaps that we had, it looks like whilst Verstappen could release in between Antonelli and Sainz here, Norris should then be able to be released between Sainz and Alonso if McLaren can pit his car pretty well. And with the gap between the two McLarens, it's feasible that they could. And even if they couldn't, there are other gaps further back. Maybe he'd have lost track position to Sainz, but he's then got 50 laps to try and overtake one car rather than a 50-lap time trial to try and basically clear the whole field and then pass Antonelli and Sainz at the end as well. So it was an obvious call to double stack the cars. In hindsight, at the time, McLaren with a big mistake, not reading the rest of the room, and it left them well and truly in the lurch.
You know, felt like I drove probably the best weekend I've had this year, if not in F1. So to not have the results is painful.
Strategy as the second car is always just a bit worse, and had me over today. So no, not even that. It wasn't even the fact with the second car. We shouldn't have done what we did. So simple as that.
And actually, it could have been a lot worse for McLaren as well. Second and fourth at the checkered flag, they got away with this one. If we have a look at the race plot, you can see the gaps that they actually ended up slotting into, and it worked really nicely. You've got Fernando Alonso down here in your Aston Martin green, and he kind of backs up everyone else behind P6. So when both McLarens end up pitting for their first stop, they emerge just ahead of Alonso one lap after another. And Fernando's really not bothered about racing with them. So he's managing his own pace at this stage. And as soon as, in fact, the McLarens come out ahead, he picks up that pace. So he's actually working as a sort of dummy McLaren at this stage to allow them the free air to go and chase Antonelli and Sainz. Had Fernando driven at a more aggressive pace, he would have been burning through his tyres a bit more. It was a risky move for Aston Martin, so what he did made sense for them, but it would have really hindered the McLarens as well if they'd have come out with Russell, with Charles Leclerc, with Isaac Hadjar at the time as well, and been behind Fernando Alonso. They wouldn't have had 7 extra laps to try and push and make the place towards Antonelli and Sainz as well, and that might have left Piastri's P2 in jeopardy. Secondly, you had Carlos Sainz in 3rd place. An amazing drive for Carlos, we'll come to that in a little bit, but he was not as fast as most of the other front runners typically are. He did a good job holding Antonelli back, but he held Antonelli back. If Kimi had have had clean air, he would have been quicker, probably quick enough to stop Piastri beating him. Likewise Russell, who had a bad start, and you've got to remember this was a race where the Ferraris were absolutely nowhere. In most other races, the Ferrari pace is somewhere near Verstappen as well. And if the Mercedes or the Ferraris could finish pretty much within 15 seconds of Max Verstappen, which they usually should do in clear air, the McLarens could have left this race outside of the top 5. So 2nd and 5th, it's a big gaffe for them, but it's kind of a situation where they got away with it not being worse.
You know, you win and lose as a team, but definitely not a great moment. You know, our evaluation of if a safety car came out on that lap was clearly incorrect. So we'll go back, study that. Nothing we can do about it now. We're leading the championship. Put Oscar at a deficit, left some points on the table. So we'll just do the best we can in Abu Dhabi. We were very strong there last year.
So finally then, had they pitted, they would have surely finished 1st and 3rd in the order that they had. Piastri had the race absolutely under control. Norris had lost it at the start with Verstappen. So let's have a look at the getaway. And it's something that's fairly clear to see when you pause straight after the lights. We've got 3 cars that start on the dirtier side of the grid. You've got Norris, we've got George Russell here from 4th position, and you've got Isaac Hadjar from 6th. And as the lights go out, they just simply don't have the grip that the other guys do. Everyone's on the medium tyre, so the tyres are the same across the board. The grip level on the surface isn't, because it's the dirty side. The outside line is the racing line, and it's been cleaned up through the weekend. So they all start dropping back. Hadjar's is the worst. He's going to drop back and come back through the pit stop phase. Russell's going to lose out to his teammate, and you can see Verstappen clearing Norris as well by the braking zone of the first corner. And that would have set up anyway Max to beat Lando in the race. It would have been very tricky for Lando to come back without any strategy ramifications from that start. Behind you've got George Russell there going wide at turn 2 and making matters worse for Mercedes. Probably cost Kimi Antonelli a chance of the podium by the time that Sainz was then able to get behind Antonelli for the pit stop phase. But yeah, in the end, it was just too little for the McLarens. On board with Lando, and we can see the start. And he just doesn't have the grip in the second phase to get away. Tries to find the slipstream from Oscar. In the end, Max does, and it gives him that extra advantage to the first corner. You don't need to give Max a second invitation to go around the outside. There he goes. So that's the first headache, but by all means, not the major headache of the Qatar Grand Prix for McLaren. So that was the big one at the front of the field for McLaren. But now we're into the chase. Lando and Oscar both trying to do their sort of virtual race, the time trial, to come back and clear as many cars as they possibly can. And they have to do that with pure pace. They're not racing anyone at this stage, and they're really maximising what they can do. So let's jump on board with Lando for turn 14. These corners are so quick in the final sector. The driver's really physically working. You can see Lando, his neck just resting up against the cockpit sides there to try and give him that little bit of relief. This is a brutal circuit, loads of fast right-hand turns. And as we come to the exit here, he's just going to drop his left-hand tyres into the gravel. And that had caused him a big oversteer and a loss of time. And that's when he got on the radio and said potential damage for him. But we have a very similar moment for Oscar just a few laps later. Once again, coming through 13. 14 is the tightest of these 3. And it's so marginal where he's just dropped it towards the gravel there on the outside. But the left rear's just caught it. And again, big moment for Oscar. Manages to keep his foot in a bit better. but they're both big snaps that cost reasonable pace. This is Lando, and you can see that speed there on lap 36 compared to lap 35, coming through turn 14 in the red, carrying that little bit more, lifting off less, and that is what caused him to find the gravel on the outside, just pushing to the absolute limit, which is fun to see. It's a big challenge, but it's the same story for both McLaren drivers. Norris with a bigger one towards the gravel. Piastri has a very similar looking moment as well. There's the data for him. Once again, carrying that little bit more through turn 14 on the lap he went off, pushing the boundaries, and as we saw, just an inch into the gravel. And they both actually did well to get away with it, particularly Norris, who caught it more. That could have been his championship properly up in smoke there. But as it was, it got away with it. The next big one for both of them was Kimi Antonelli right at the end. So Piastri had to catch and pass Antonelli, did it in the middle stint, and this was really, really well done. No second guessing himself, just opened up the inside and plunged down that inside line. It's a good move. Antonelli didn't fight it particularly hard in the end towards the apex, because he knew once Piastri had gone in so deep that was done. But you can see here how Piastri has gone in so deep. Sainz is there on the apex, and Piastri now scooping it up at turn 1 is so far away from the apex. But the first turn in Qatar is really wide. It invites the late lunge. It has to be really aggressive because the braking zone's not huge. But remember, Piastri's in a McLaren. This car is on fire on this day, and he's on fresher tyres as well at this stage than Antonelli. So he sends it in, and it's a really strong move. But we get our next one. It's a question. Did Kimi purposefully shift over for Norris to take P4? The answer, emphatically, is no, he didn't. It's a mistake from Antonelli. Let's have a look at it. Coming through turn 9, remember he's pushing to get close to Carlos Sainz at this stage. You've got Sainz into turn 10, you've got Antonelli, and then you've got Norris. So Kimi's still thinking that's a podium place for him. That's a brilliant result if he can get ahead of Sainz. It's a solid result in 4th place. 5th to 4th, less of a drama. 4th to 3rd, that's a podium difference. So he's pushing really hard. He has an oversteer at turn 9, gets the car stopped from a tighter line, and then tries to pick up the gas and just has an oversteer again at turn 10. The tyres are going away at this stage. It's right towards the end of the race. We can see it once again on board with Lando. There's your first moment. So whilst Kimi can only open up half the road in towards turn 10, Lando can open up the full thing, get the car rotated with better speed. So Kimi's still trying to carry in a bit of speed, but now running wide, finding that oversteer, and it's enough just to put him off the road on the exit, and that's a Lando Norris overtake that's fairly comfortable in the end. But you can see there's the same moments that Lando was having really there, just smaller moments correcting through the apex of 9, through the apex of 10, and it's exactly the same as Fernando Alonso has as well in the final stint here on the hard tyres, gets to an apex, and then just simply actually spins the car, does a beautiful 360 to not lose too much. It's just Hadjar and Russell, and Hadjar will eventually retire from the race, so it really didn't cost Alonso a huge amount. But it shows that rear grip coming through turn 10, it's tricky. It's always one where you're sliding towards the exit. You want to get on the gas. It's a good full throttle run. And it's an innocent mistake from Antonelli. Certainly no gamesmanship from what I can see there. Here's the data of it. And every bit of his inputs as well looks like he's doing nothing irrational from the cockpit to generate this oversteer. Once again, he's slightly quicker through turn 9, has the oversteer. You can see the big snap on the steering there. That's these cat-like reactions to stop it fully spinning. But then here what I'm looking for is the throttle to see if he's just stamped on the gas, because if you have 1,000 horsepower in all of these Formula 1 cars, you can spin the car if you really want to spin the car. It's fairly straightforward. You just put the throttle down like a switch and you can have a big oversteer. But Antonelli really hasn't done that. He's applied it on this red lap, actually slightly more gradually. He's coming from a lower speed, but he's more gradual in his throttle application here, which you can see there. Getting on it earlier, but from a lower speed, picking it up. The rear's just overheated from that turn 9 moment, and round he goes. Steering trace very similar. It's just a simple oversteer at an unlucky moment.
I went in a bit quicker into turn 9 and lost the rear and went off track. So definitely, was a mistake, and I need to move forward now.